When the Convention of 1787 was called, it was not called to come up with a new constitution. The job it was given was to amend and reform and improve on the Articles of Confederation. And what happened probably should be a lesson to us all, because they got there and they just ran away with the thing. When they came to that point, and they did run away with it, they essentially had, in addition to their frustration, they had two sources of inspiration. There really was an extraordinarily well-educated, philosophically educated elite at that time that was running the convention. They understood Montesquieu, they understood Locke, they understood the concept of separating powers so that we would not have what they regarded as a British kind of royal tyranny. They also had the notion of a written document to constitute themselves, and they had gotten this idea in their head simply because the colonial charters and the charters, the commissions to the colonial governors were written documents, and they purported to set out what the governor could do, what the governor could not do, what the provincial legislature could do, could not do, and so on. So they had a model for a written constitution. And that in itself did not guarantee what we got. There was one other serious problem that they simply had to work out when they got there. And that was, in James Madison's view, the most serious problem they had to get out of the way, or they were going to get nowhere, was the problem of how the individual states were going to be represented in a newly formed national Congress.
Our founders understood that if there is going to be debate, and debate is the way we govern ourselves, there has got to be compromise. And I can say with certainty that they knew that, because that's how the Constitution came to be in Philadelphia. In 1787, they got together, they debated, they had to make trade-offs, but they ultimately came out in September with the adoption of a constitution that then had to go before the states and the ratifying conventions.
And the only way any constitution, and for that matter, any improvement on the Articles, was really going to take place was by a compromise on principles. Didn't mean selling out, but it meant a compromise on a reasonable basis. And so we ended up with a lower house represented on a population basis. We ended up with a Senate in which each state equally had 2 votes. That was the big and the small. We ended up with the compromise that looks infamous to us when we look back on it now, of counting slaves. A slave is 3/5 of a person in order to bring the southern states, the slave states, along. So the basic lesson was a lesson of compromise that brought the Constitution to the point of signature and ultimately the nation into being as we know it.
So compromise matters. It's fundamental to debate, to the way we govern. And we've seen, I think, both at the national level and here in New Hampshire, what happens when people are not willing to compromise.